everybody, welcome back to Tim and Tim Talk. This is our final episode in the Deep Dive series. Tim Kerbavaz, welcome back.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here. And to wrap this one up, I'm excited.
We really went deep on this one. So let's bring this back. Okay, right. Episode 1, we talked about sort of the ideology, how we put all of this together. Episode 2, we went into basically into the control room, talked about every single position. Episode 3, we talked about every position outside of our control room. And here we are, episode 4. What's left, Tim?
So this is where we're going to talk about what we learned on this production, what we would love to do differently in the future, and what we're taking away, and what we hope you take away from this show and this series.
I think that would probably fill an encyclopedia. I mean, do they still have the Encyclopedia Britannicas? Because there was a lot.
In print? Yeah, in multiple
print.
Volumes, yeah.
I put it right next to my phone book.
Exactly, yeah. So, Tim, I mean, I think one of the things that we learned, the top line lesson we learned is kind of the distinction between the technical process and the production process. What was that lesson there?
Oh, it was huge, Jim. It was huge. The difference between the technical, right? So you can have all of the technology, available to you and all of the resources, but if it's not properly planned and you don't have a clear-cut plan that unifies the whole team, your show's as good as sunk. You really, Tim, the key that the success that we had was literally the months and months of pre-production time that we did, sorting through the documents. We had documents spanned over multiple ecosystems, and all of that information had to be funneled to the right technician at the right time. And that technician is so busy doing so many other tasks, they only had a quick moment to glance. So, really, I'd like to shout out to our pre-production team that really organized those documents in a way. And, it took us a couple revisions to see what that information was that only the technicians needed. We stripped out information that was, it was nice to know, but it became too distracting.
Totally. That really crystallizing the important information so it was ready when you needed it, and that pre-production process is super important. And I've seen this on other shows even recently, that shows come apart because of the lack of pre-production. And so just a reminder that work is really important. It's not a waste. It's super important to put in that time, put in that effort, and have that production and documentation.
Tim, they say practice makes perfect. They should really say practice and documentation makes perfect.
Absolutely. And, having it in writing helps so much. Other things we could learn, I mean, kind of talking through departments, audio, we had pretty good success with audio.
One.
Yeah. But are there any things we could think about we could do differently next time?
Well, I mean, Tim, you and I discussed this earlier, right? When it came to, audio, and some folks were telling me, talk more about your audio process. You kind of, skipped over that. Well, I mean, let's be honest, there wasn't much more to talk about because we didn't have an A1. Tim, do you think that surprises people that we actually did not have an A1 for a show that's this big and this important?
I think we could get some flack from that. I mean, I think folks, my peers in production, exactly. Yeah. I think, the crux of this is we were using, a conference calling tool, right? Which, meant that our audio options were fairly limited. We had basically, a mix down of the audio. And I think, there's not much we could have done.
We could, in order to have isolated the channels, it would have been a really big undertaking that we would have had to done, to every single studio. And it really would have complicated our engineering for what we felt was it would have been a gain, but it would have been, I felt, a minimal gain. Since we did have successful audio through our show, I believe we made the right decision. But it's always great to have the A1 available if possible.
And I would say, look at the context of the show, right?
Yes.
If there's a lot of different sources of audio, a lot of, fader writing, if there's a lot of playback and mixed content, then it's super important to have that audio engineer to really manage that. We were basically taking the one audio feed, in and running that. So it was a little less complicated, but I would say for a lot of shows that we work on, it is super important to have that audio position.
Absolutely. And, in this, in our main control room that I'm in right now, with Dante being routed, absolutely, we brought in live musicians, and it's just so much better when we can separate that and put it onto a mixer. But you're right, like with our workshops, it's one person talking. AMAs, we had 4 to 5 people talking, and it definitely could have benefited from it, but we had great audio, and it just, like we said, it would have been so much work to separate these systems out to make it
Totally. Speaking of systems, with our streaming and very robust streaming and QC management system, I'm really proud of that system. I mean, I was worked really hard with your team to build that out. So,
but how many gray hairs did that system cost me?
Absolutely.
That I have to pay you now for.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely a very complex system, and it was really because of that client requirement. Would we do that again, Tim?
I would like to say no, but we don't get to decide what the production is. We interpret our clients' goals, and by the time that the decisions came to us, they were basically solidified. Schedules are published, so we had to create a system that serviced our clients' needs. And so, with that, I would like to emphasize to all, our fellow producers out there that simplifying the process at every possible turn is always going to be your best friend, and the keys to success to have a great and consistent show. I mean, do you agree with
I can
that?
say I was just talking to a friend about another production, where, during rehearsal, the show got more and more complicated, another virtual production, right? And the show got more and more complicated, and, they added layers of technology for, little bits and pieces of the production, but to the point that you're adding so much complexity to the show that it actually risks the production. And so I would say, when we can simplify the production and simplify the technology, it's going to make it a higher chance of success.
And this is hard for us, right? Because you and I are gadget people, and we're
Totally.
technology nerds, and we love to throw as much as possible at a show. But I think, as we've worked in this business for as long as we have, we understand that, our first service is to the client and making sure that it is a seamless and successful show. And then if there is that space for that technology, or specifically that technology services their needs, then we'll deploy it.
And as we said earlier in previous episodes, picking the technology that fits the client's needs best, even if, exactly, it's not our needs that matter here. It's really making sure that there's really an easy experience for the talent, for the client, and then that we're building systems around that.
100%. And then, okay, let's, Tim, next thing, NDI. Well, so that was a good solution for our records. This was the first time that we deployed an NDI only record station, that recorded essentially every control room. And overall, we were happy with it. But the key takeaway from this is that when deploying new technologies, make sure you always have your tried and true tested technology as your backup. It's your backup parachute. So sometimes we had to go to that local hard drive because of a kink in the system and something that failed. But to our clients, that never happened, and that's the sign of a good production company is having those redundancies in place.
Totally. And we're talking about systems and, the streaming workflows and the NDI systems. I want to highlight the captioning workflow, which, was part of that really complex streaming and QC workflow. One of the things that I didn't mention in the last episode about captioning was providing preparation materials to the captioners was super important. We built one of the many documents we built was a document for the captioners themselves who, I don't know if we mentioned, they were all remote, right? So they were actually
we didn't mention that. Zero captioners, the small army of captioners, as we called them. Not one of them came through the door.
They were all working remotely from their homes, right? And so we needed to get them the information they needed it, like we said, when they needed it, including things like the speaker names spelled correctly, and the slides and summaries and synopsis of the different streams, so that they were ready when they went to type up the captions, that they had the correct spellings and the titles and all that ready. And so having that documentation prepared in advance and handed off in a way that this small army of captioners could all access it was super important. The other was having a back channel way of communicating with the captioners during the event, so that if something came up, and this did several times where they needed to reach out to us, they were having an audio problem hearing the audio from the event, or one of the systems didn't work, and so having both a back channel and a backup way of getting them audio was super important.
100%.
And speaking of like monitoring the audio and video, one of the things we really didn't talk about, but was that we also had these monitoring points, not only for our team in the studio, but also for our client to monitor what was happening in the studio, because the client was also remote. Right?
100% remote. I like to use the example, right? Like at a football game, the best place to watch a football game is on TV. And so it's no different with our virtual control rooms. So when we have 4 different studios, the best place for the client to watch it is from a remote location. And so, Tim, this is, we've now been using SRTs for a couple of years now, but boy, I absolutely love this technology. I love the fact of how we could deploy essentially the multi-view behind me to any of our clients anywhere. It's such a powerful tool that we just never used before.
And it gives the client producer a backseat view of what's happening in the studio, and they can basically look over the director's shoulder and make sure that we're giving them exactly the show they want. One of the other things we set up was, in addition to monitoring via SRT for the producer team, we also had their stakeholders who wanted to monitor the streams in real time. And so we actually had multiple separate conference calls for the broader production team, one for every studio, to monitor what was happening. And they were actually set up that they could have a conversation in that room while watching the stream in real time. And then they could also then see it on YouTube, because of course, once it hits YouTube, it's about 30 seconds delayed, or late, I should say, from real time. And so, in this conference call, they're able to see it as it happens, have a conversation, and then watch it again.
Now, here's a pro tip, because people are going to rightfully so call it out, say, hey, YouTube has an extremely low latency function, right? They basically cuts it down to 1 or 2 seconds. First, as of this recording, it doesn't work with captioning. And second, you don't want to do that especially on a larger scale production, because that is a buffered experience for the viewer, and you're preventing any hiccups. You're basically providing a seamless and a better viewing experience for your viewers. So yes, there's ultra low latency, but if only if you have to use it without captions, should you use it?
Right, and absolutely. Some of those idiosyncrasies we discovered about captioning, the ultra latency mode, captioning only works with certain frame rates and certain setting. You have to set the settings in certain orders. And so one of the biggest takeaways that I have about captioning and streaming on this is, some documentation of those really salient points, those really important idiosyncrasies of YouTube in particular, and how it handles the streaming and captioning. And I've got a whole page of notes of kind of best practices for next time. And I've also then post that show really built up that tool set of, kind of those technology stack that allows the captioning. And I've really built some more robust ways to monitor and, interact with the captioners, because it's super important to have that level of access.
So Tim, we basically, because we did our due diligence, because we had our ample amount of production times, we can safely say that there was no files, right?
About that, Tim. About that. So there was one not so small fire, luckily not in the building, but there was a literal fire outside the building.
The mountain was burning behind our facility, essentially. It was, I think it was like a 4-alarm fire that the city was responding to.
And there was also super high winds. And so it was like, it doesn't normally get that windy in South San Francisco.
When you receive text messages saying, advisory alert, please stay inside, watch out for down power lines whilst the show is taking place, you're just like, oh boy.
So we had a backup internet, we had backup streams, we had all this, redundancy in the cloud. But the one thing we didn't have a backup for was, the power company, right? We were relying on the power, and it was a commercial area. It was a warehouse. It was not insignificant, a power infrastructure. But, we were worried about that risk.
Absolutely, and PG&E does a fantastic job of they're the most reliable solution. We thought initially, like, should we run this whole show off of generators or PG&E? And PG&E's one job essentially, right, is to deliver power. And so in our area, it's a very reliable source. But when the mountain's burning behind you, that's when we sort of had to make emergency calls. And luckily,
Yeah.
we talked about it and we planned, so we knew exactly what to do.
Yeah, but we ended up, as you said, making some phone calls late in the game there, and had a cinema generator delivered and
I think
parked
we pulled it
right
off of
outside
like
the
a
building.
Marvel's movie set, like down the
Exactly,
street.
exactly,
Like, can we
exactly.
borrow this, please, for a couple
Borrow
of days?
this, yeah. And parked it there. We had a hatch in the front door. We ran the power cable through, and we ran distribution cables to all of the studios. And because, as you said, we had thought this could possibly be a possibility. We were really hoping that it wouldn't, but we had a plan for this. And so all of the studios were on UPS's battery backups. And that would give us, maybe 10 minutes of runtime on the battery backup. And so, we had set it up basically that we dropped this power distribution in each room under each table, right where the UPS was. And so the plan of action was the power went out. Everyone would reach under their table, unplug themselves from the wall, and plug themselves into unplug the UPS from the wall, rather, and plug the UPS into the generator. We would run outside, fire up the generator, and we'd have about 10 minutes to make that turnover in every studio and get us back online. And so, the idea would be that it would interrupt our workflow a little bit, but it wouldn't interrupt the show. The streams would stay live, and that everything would stay online as planned. And so, thankfully, the power stayed on all night, but we were out there. I was working the night shift. I had my finger on the generator button there, ready to get started. In case,
production never fails to excite. I mean, I think this is sort of what I was drawn to. Usually, maybe not the fires, but sort of like you have to be a master planner of. You have to basically be prepared for any scenario at any given time. And what I love is just you also have to be resourceful, and you have to figure out a solution. And inaction is an action. So I love the fact that we all responded. We all responded professionally, and we deployed a solution that thankfully we didn't have to use.
And just having that backup plan, we always have to have the backup plan and then the next backup plan, right? And just knowing, we have the steps we've planned for, but kind of knowing what the next thing is, having a plan A, B, C, D, and E is really important to, really just making sure that shows like this are successful.
We didn't want to be the front page of, Reddit for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly. So, Tim, we've talked a lot about some lessons learned. What's your biggest takeaway closing out here for this show?
I mean, good question, Tim. That's a really good question because there was so many, right? There's so many first. I mean, this was the first for Google I/O. This was their first time that this was 100% virtual, and it was their biggest developer show. So, what did me personally have as a takeaway? I would say show day. Leading up to show day, with all the rehearsal, with all the production, there was a buzz. There was an electricity in the air. There was a lot of sort of stirring and motion. And there was just a lot of excitement of how this project was coming together. But you know what? During the show, it was absolutely whisper quiet. I am talking 4 control rooms filled with technicians, and you could hear a pin drop. And so I sort of make the analogy that, when you have a perfectly in-sync engine and tuned engine, it's just a beautiful hum. And that's what we achieved, sort of that serenity. And, I took a moment to myself and I just listened to the quiet while the show was taking place and wow, how beautiful the sound of quiet is. Because it had to be quiet because the inbounds, the control rooms, inbound A and inbound B, right? They had to hear the next person talk. So everyone essentially had to use headphones. There's plenty of audio, but it was all in the headphones.
Yeah. And on that, Tim? I mean, you and I spent months talking about this show, planning this show, from when the time that you first were contacted by the client and brought me in on this project to when we actually went to air. Months had gone by, hours and hours of late night phone calls. You and I were on the phone, 11 o'clock, midnight, 1 a.m., lots of sleepless nights. It was a moving target, right? The plan kept changing. The client's needs kept changing. Lots of evolution to the show. And it was really amazing.
Which was for the better, right? There's evolution. No, it is.
It is.
We love sort of shedding that new skin. It was fun.
Yeah. But when we got to the show day, it was really amazing to see how everything came together. The technology was all lined up. The people were all rowing in the same direction. The crew was working together in tandem. Everything worked to make the show a success. And so that feeling of just really great satisfaction when, as you said, that moment of zen during the event, and then also really that celebration afterward when that last stream went off air, and we can give that,
Collective
audible shout
sigh
out,
of relief in
collective
the
sigh,
building.
that's a wrap.
Yeah,
That
so
was
much fun.
really gratifying to, know that we pulled it off, and that it was really a collective effort.
I mean, I honestly think I will never forget that moment. It was absolutely, I mean, it's such an achievement, as you said. And, the other thing too is, let's also give a shout out to our friends and colleagues in the industry, because
Right.
we know, we're fortunate to have been in this industry enough that we know a nice variety of folks, right? From manufacturers to just, engineers at the top of the game. We're making phone calls to Los Angeles. We're making phone calls to New York. We're reaching out to experts in a specific field for answers to questions that we didn't know. Did I say that backwards?
Exactly. No, you said that backward. No, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that I found most valuable about, or most gratifying rather, about the industry is, obviously we're competing for work, we're competing for client, but we have a tremendous network of support and sort of colleagues all over the country, and having folks that we can turn to for advice, commiseration. I have a whole group of people that I call just to vent about things that are happening, and I get texts from shows, and, just kind of that support network and community that we have. Our industry is not a very big one. It's a very tight knit
No,
industry. And
not
so,
at this level. It's very
being,
small.
no, and so being, part of an industry that has that level of collaboration and collegiality is super important to me. And it's really great to see folks come together. Obviously, folks gave us support. I hope that, through this show, we're helping other folks learn things. And certainly, lots of folks, call on us, and we get lots of messages and texts and things like that with questions. And so, I think it's important that as an industry, we support each other as, things have evolved so much in the last couple
So
of
much.
years. Things have changed so quickly. Having that community support is vital to a robust industry.
And if you're starting, if you're growing, if you're a producer, or if you work with a company, yeah, feel free to reach out to friends and colleagues outside of just that specific company you work for, because they'll help you. You will help them. I mean, it's absolutely the collegiate level of support. As I love that saying, Tim. That's really,
Yeah.
it's so true.
And speaking of reaching out, you can reach out to us on our social channels. We're at Tim and Tim Talk on all the platforms, wherever you want to find us. We'd love it if you've gotten value out of this video, out of the whole series of videos on this topic, that you'd share that with your friends and colleagues. And like I said, reach out with questions, leave comments, let us know what you'd like to hear about next.
What's the next deep dive, Tim? I think we can officially bring this deep dive to a close. Let's bring it back up to land safely. And, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. You'll give us your feedback, and on to the next one, Tim. You ready to do it?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Tim Kay.
And I'm Tim Kerbavaz, and we talked. Thanks, folks.